It was supposed to be just another quiet evening at a small-town diner. Families chatted over plates of comfort food, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air, until a group of rowdy bikers barged in, their loud laughter and careless swagger turning heads. Most of the diners avoided eye contact, hoping to stay out of their way, but their antics soon grew impossible to ignore. In the corner of the restaurant, a lone man sat calmly, observing the chaos unfold. He looked unassuming, a retired veteran, enjoying his meal in peace. But when the bikers crossed the line, targeting the wrong person with their drunken bravado, they had no idea who they were dealing with. What happened next left the entire restaurant stunned, and those bikers walked away with a lesson they'd never forget. Stick around to find out how this veteran turned the tables when no one expected it. The veteran had noticed the bikers the moment they entered. Their loud voices and reckless attitude weren't easy to ignore, but he kept to himself, quietly finishing his meal. His posture was relaxed, almost as if he didn't have a care in the world. But behind those calm eyes was someone who had seen far worse than a group of unruly bikers throwing their weight around. Meanwhile, the bikers were getting bolder, their laughter growing louder as they mocked the waitstaff and tossed insults across the room. A few diners left early, not wanting to be caught in whatever trouble might follow. The veteran stayed put, his eyes flickering now and then toward the group. One biker, bigger and more aggressive than the rest, noticed the veteran sitting alone. Maybe it was his quiet demeanor or his steady gaze, but something about the man seemed to irk him. That's when the biker decided to make his move. The biker sauntered over, his boots thudding against the tiled floor as the rest of his crew egged him on with hoots and laughter. The veteran barely glanced up, calmly finishing his coffee as the man loomed over his table. "Hey, old man," the biker sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "You look like you've seen a thing or two. Bet you've got some stories, huh?" His tone was taunting, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. A hush fell over the room as the tension thickened. The veteran set his mug down carefully, his movements deliberate, as if weighing his next step. His face remained neutral, almost unreadable, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that even the biker couldn't ignore. "I've seen more than you'd believe," the veteran replied calmly, his voice steady and low. It wasn't a challenge, but it stopped the biker in his tracks for a moment. That pause didn't last long, though. The man laughed and leaned closer. "What, you think you're tough? Bet you wouldn't last 2 seconds against me." His voice grew louder, his bravado fueled by the nervous chuckles of his crew. The veteran didn't flinch. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and met the biker's gaze with an unsettling calm. The silence between them was electric, and everyone in the diner seemed to hold their breath. The veteran finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Son, you don't know what you're getting yourself into." The biker's grin faltered, just for a moment. But he wasn't about to back down, not in front of his friends. He straightened up, puffing out his chest, and said, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing." But the way the veteran's gaze held steady made it clear he was about to learn otherwise. The room felt heavier with each passing second. The other bikers leaned back in their chairs, their laughter dying down as they watched their friend face off with the veteran. The diners were frozen in place, unsure if they should intervene or quietly slip out. Even the waitstaff huddled behind the counter, their anxious whispers barely audible. The biker stepped closer, towering over the veteran's table now. His grin was forced, his bravado cracking under the weight of the veteran's unshaken calm. "What's the matter?" "Got nothing to say now," he cheered, trying to regain control of the moment. Without breaking eye contact, the veteran slowly stood up. He wasn't a large man, but the way he carried himself made him seem larger than life. His presence demanded attention, and even the biker seemed to hesitate, though he tried not to show it. The veteran's voice was steady, almost eerily calm. "You think being loud makes you strong. You think fear makes you powerful." His words cut through the tension like a blade, and for a moment, even the biker looked unsure. The air in the diner felt charged, as if the whole room was waiting for something to snap. The biker's friends began shifting uncomfortably, whispering among themselves, unsure if they should step in. But the biker wasn't ready to back down. His pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to let an older man show him up in front of everyone. "I think you've got one too many war stories in your head," the biker said, trying to sound confident, but failing to hide the edge in his voice. "Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson." The veteran tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then, with a calm that was almost unsettling, he said, "Careful, son. Lessons can come at a price you're not ready to pay." The biker's fist clenched, and for a split second, it seemed like the whole diner held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The tension in the room was unbearable. The biker leaned forward, his hand twitching as if ready to make his move. But before anything could happen, the door of the diner swung open with a sharp creak. Everyone's attention snapped to the entrance, and in walked another man, his presence commanding immediate respect. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a jacket with a familiar military insignia. His face carried the same calm intensity as the veteran's, but his arrival brought a ripple of unease among the bikers. The newcomer scanned the room quickly, taking in the situation with a practiced eye. His gaze settled on the veteran, and a slight nod passed between them, a silent understanding that spoke volumes. The lead biker faltered, his bravado shrinking under the weight of this unexpected twist. He tried to laugh it off, turning to his crew. "What is this, your backup?" he mocked, his voice shaky despite his best efforts. The newcomer ignored the taunt, walking over to stand beside the veteran. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. The room seemed to exhale as the veteran gave a slight smile. "Just a misunderstanding," the veteran replied, his voice steady. But his eyes stayed locked on the biker, as if daring him to take things further. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence unraveling. The newcomer crossed his arms, his calm demeanor doing more to unnerve them than any raised voice could. "Misunderstandings have a way of getting messy," he said, his tone pointed. "Best to clear them up before they go too far." The lead biker looked torn, caught between his bruised pride and the growing realization that this wasn't a fight he wanted. His friends had started to shift uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier bravado replaced by an unspoken agreement to wrap things up. But just when it seemed like the tension might break, the lead biker made a sudden move, one that would push the situation to the edge and force everyone to face the consequences of their choices. The lead biker lunged forward, his fist aiming straight for the veteran's chest. Gasps filled the diner as time seemed to slow down. But the veteran moved like lightning, calm, precise, and with an ease that spoke of years of training. He sidestepped the punch effortlessly, grabbing the biker's wrist mid-swing and twisting it, just enough to make the man drop to his knees with a pained grunt. The room was silent, save for the muffled cries of the biker, who now found himself completely at the mercy of the veteran. The rest of the gang stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or stay back. Before anyone could react, the newcomer stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's enough," he said firmly, his tone commanding yet measured. "Nobody needs to get hurt here. Walk away while you still can." The veteran let go of the biker's wrist, stepping back as the man scrambled to his feet, cradling his arm. His face was a mix of anger and humiliation, But something in the veteran's steady gaze and the newcomer's imposing presence kept him from retaliating. The other bikers began backing toward the door, muttering apologies to no one in particular. The leader hesitated, his pride keeping him rooted in place for a moment longer. But even he eventually relented, spitting out a bitter, "This isn't over," before storming out with his crew trailing behind him. The door slammed shut, and the diner erupted into murmurs of relief and astonishment. The waitstaff peeked out from behind the counter, and a few diners even clapped quietly, their nerves still frayed. The veteran turned to the newcomer, a faint smile on his lips. "Good timing." The man shrugged. "Figured you could handle it, but it's always nice to have backup." As the tension melted away, the veteran reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Handing it to the newcomer, he said, "You might want to read this. Turns out they've been causing trouble across town." The man opened the note, his brow furrowing as he read. Then, with a glance at the door the bikers had just exited through, he said, "Looks like this isn't over after all." And just like that, the quiet diner was left with a new layer of mystery, leaving everyone wondering what would happen next. The diner slowly returned to normal, though the air still buzzed with the aftermath of what had just unfolded. People exchanged whispers, grateful that things hadn't spiraled further out of control. The veteran and the newcomer sat back down at the table, their presence still commanding quiet respect. The waiter, now a little braver, approached them hesitantly. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude. "Those guys have been harassing places around here for weeks. We didn't know how to stop them." The veteran gave a small nod. "Sometimes it just takes standing your ground." The newcomer folded the note and slid it into his jacket. "We'll make sure they don't bother anyone else." This isn't their first mistake, but it might be their last. As they stood to leave, the veteran glanced around the room, offering a quiet reassurance with his calm demeanor. The confrontation had ended, but the lesson lingered. True strength isn't in loudness or threats. It's in knowing when to act and how to handle adversity with quiet confidence. The two men walked out into the night, leaving the diners with a story they'd never forget and a newfound appreciation for those who carry their strength with dignity.